Attention, the outlook of the LA Valiant is subject to change, which means that this video could quickly become outdated. While this is generally what the roster looks and feels like, there's always the chance they make some more moves or end up having a better projection than initially anticipated. With roster changes likely looming out of the Chengdu Hunters, the finalized version of the Valiant is a total mystery, and as it currently stands, I just don't have any more time to sit around and wait, which is why I'm rushing this out despite the potential changes coming. Thank you for your understanding, and now on to the video. Well, here we are. The final episode of the How Good Is Your Overwatch League team series here in 2022, and I couldn't possibly think of a better team to cap it off with than the Los Angeles Valiant. That's a joke, by the way. The attachment to the franchise these days is very little, but maybe this year can change that because after quite arguably the worst year in League history, the Valiant were prepared to make some changes. Last year was nothing more than a filler roster. This is what many consider to be their actual first year of a rebuild in the East, and to be completely honest, I'm not exactly sure if they'll be all that interesting still. Let's talk about why. First and foremost, it should be noted that the Valiant ditched everything from the previous year. This includes players and coaches, and nobody survived, which just isn't a surprise to anybody. We all knew this was coming. This team was god-awful. There was no justification for keeping a single person. They tried to make ends meet, nothing more. They didn't have any money, and they were forced to make a roster right before the start of the year. They struggled greatly both as a unit and as individuals, and I can't really blame the roster. That's the really sad part. They were kind of just put in a bad situation, but we'd all be lying to ourselves if we weren't saying good riddance. In what seems to be a trend for this franchise as of late, new year means new them. The good news is, this year feels a bit different than the last. Not only is this team more skillful, but their likability shot up like a rocket. Regardless of the season outcome, more people will generally be willing to cheer for them. The main reason for this likability factor is largely due to the signings they made at Damage. In particular, a player of legend finally made his way back into the league. Please give a warm welcome back to Dia. Regardless of your feelings on the Valiant right now, I think most of us can agree that this is an awesome moment. People have literally been waiting years for the Dia redemption arc. He by himself is going to increase the likability of this franchise quite a bit. Is that all he brings to the table, though? No, probably not. It's been a while since he's played, but there's room for him to be one of the best players on his team. Before failing to make the league last year, Dia had become one of the most dominant hit scans and contenders. His play on Team CC played a major role in them winning contenders and the gauntlet. He really found his groove on this team, and it seemed like it was his destiny to come back to the league. But for whatever the reason, it didn't work out for him last year. He supposedly did have an option from the Valiant at that time, but he really didn't want to join a team that was that terrible. He seemed league caliber for sure. I guess that just the tryouts or whatever didn't go too well for him. Regardless of the reasoning, Dia stopped competing for a while after this. Maybe he lost motivation or something. The man took a whole year off from professional play before getting signed this year. As a result of this, I'm not exactly sure how good Dia could be at this level. Generally, there's a good chance that he makes good contributions. He's wanted this for a very long time, and I doubt that he's going to completely waste the opportunity. Dia has proven that he can be strong when he's playing with confidence. He definitely has it in him to be mid-tier, or even better at hit scan. It's not going to be easy though, which is why I generally think of him as more of an underdog since the East actually does have some pretty ridiculous hit scans. It's good to have him back in the league and everything, but Dia is in for the fight of his life. The league is in a really crazy state compared to the last time he got any sort of actual starting time. The good news here is Dia is far from the only guy who's going to be depended on, which could help him perform better. The Valiant actually signed 3 other DPS to give them a fairly deep rotation, surprisingly. The other 3 DPS players joining the roster are Innovation, Becky, and Ezhan. The guy I personally am the most excited for is Innovation. He's been a staple of Team CC's DPS line for years. Innovation's a solid rotational piece with a strong proficiency on Tracer. He also plays a lot of general hit scan along with Sombra and Mei, but most people recognize him for his affinity on Tracer. I'm a pretty big fan of his work. He's not perfect by any means, but he's got more than a few ways to be useful. His flexibility and hero specialties make him somebody you can rely on to start and be swapped on and off with no problem. He's already kind of been in that role the last couple of years anyway, so he's kind of already in his element, I guess you could say. Just to add on to the comfort levels, Dia and Ezhan are former teammates of his, so he kind of already knows how to synergize and bounce off his fellow DPS pretty well. From the point of specialties and overall talent, the X and O's and everything like that, Innovation seems like a good fit. Who I'm maybe a bit more unsure of would be the other two. I can see the promise from each of them, but I'm a little on the fence. At the very least, Becky's going to have a clear-cut use on the team. He's the only true projectile specialist on the roster currently, and he might even play some tank from time to time because he can play Doomfist. What's great about him is that his hero pool doesn't really overlap with a lot of the others at all. He also kind of feels like one of those dark horse rookies who could surprisingly end up going really hard. Becky isn't ridiculously exciting, but he's still interesting for sure. As for Ezhan, there's curiosity to be had, seeing as he kind of would go on to be the replacement for Dia after he decided to leave for a while. From the small samples of gameplay I've watched, I could feel the skill. His Ashe, Cassidy, and Sim all felt useful during the moments that Team CC was finding success. Who knows? He might even be better than Dia thanks to his recent experience. Overall, the DPS line is fairly balanced. They're not incredible, but I do like that they have some options. Dive, bunker, rush, those are all things they could play somewhat comfortably. They've got 2 hit scan options in the case that one of them goes cold, and a good bit of flexibility overall. They're not incredible, but I think that you have to admit they have some decent versatility going on. Likeable or not though, I have some doubts. I don't want this to be the case because I love Dia to death, but it feels to me like they're just gonna fall short here at times. Not only do they have a few coin flip rookies, but their hit scan doesn't feel as strong compared to most of the teams in APAC. It's a small region over there, and a lot of these rosters are relatively stacked. Dia and the boys might be strong, but I think most of us would say they're currently underdogs. Hopefully the rookies do show some development and Dia reawakens his prime, otherwise this could end up being a very long year. They've got some potential for sure, so it's not really the end of the world, I suppose. It's unfortunate that I don't feel this way about any other positions though, which gets me into the tank position. The Valiant announced their one and only tank this year, as of right now, will be Sashin. If you don't recognize the name, he played for the Spark a couple of years ago. There was a brief period of time in 2020 where he was the emergency off-tank for them as Rio was nursing a wrist injury, and it was right before they signed QOQ. And his play was anything but pretty. The only thing he really played was Zarya, which to be fair means that this might work to his advantage, seeing as Zarya is apparently pretty good, but there's no way he could get away with just running her consistently. There's no way it's gonna happen. Now I suppose he could be a decent Doomfist, seeing as he's a former DPS player, but there's no way of telling for sure. Either way, he's not exactly someone that you deem trustworthy on a majority of the tanks in the game. I'm not exactly sure if the Valiant didn't have a lot of options here, or if the coaching really hit it off with him, but either way, he's not exactly someone that you feel confident about. I hope there was a good reason for signing him, because right now he is one of the most unimpressive looking tanks in the Overwatch League. The man hasn't been on a team since he left the Spark, and I'm honestly shocked that he made it back. If there's any positive note to take away from this for Valiant fans out there, he still is widely unproven on a majority of the tanks in the game, which means it could go either way. He's played so little outside of Zarya, which might mean he's more capable than we think. That's probably putting it nicely though, I'd say. How much better could he really be than we actually think? Could we expect him to be an average level player? I'd venture to say the answer is no. Even the not-so-great teams of the APAC region have better-looking tanks at a glance. I don't think there's a single team that you'd argue has a worse tank situation than the Valiant. Sashin didn't do that much to impress on the Spark, so the doubts are going to be in full force. While I hope that he does prove us wrong, I'm definitely not getting my hopes up. As for support, it's somewhere in between my feelings for tank and DPS. I don't completely despise Alexy's Coldest backline, but I don't love them either. They basically signed 2 okay players. Let's call it how it is. Coldest was essentially perma-benched on Hangzhou outside of that MCD drop that happened. Coldest used to be respectable during his Chinese Contenders days, but that was a long time ago. If you ask me, there were probably some more worthy options out there to sign if you're the Valiant. It's true that Coldest has never gotten a chance to be a real starter under normal circumstances, but you could also argue that he wouldn't be getting a second chance right now if it weren't for the Valiant. If he had been signed after showing off more skill in Contenders for a year, I'd maybe feel a bit better. Fortunately for the Valiant, I guess though, there aren't a ton of heavy top-tier flex supports in APAC as it currently stands, so even if Coldest doesn't look amazing on paper, there might be a possibility that he holds his own. If I'm putting money on it, he's probably still one of the more least favorable to be top tier. When considering Lengsa, you might feel a tiny bit better about him, but not by much. My reason for saying he could be a little bit better is because he was okay on Chengdu back in the day, and then continued to be of use on their academy team a little bit as they went on to win 2 straight championships. The only thing is, he was not dominating by any stretch of the imagination. He's not the Chinese version of like Charong, let's say. Lynx is just alright. He's not extremely favorable on any particular hero, and he genuinely felt like more of a background player on Team Chaser. He might have the more recent playtime and success compared to Coldest, but the competition at main support is arguably greater. The support line doesn't exactly feel where it needs to be. If it makes Valiant fans feel a bit more confident though, it's definitely in better shape compared to last year. It's not saying much, but going from high B to a guy who actually plays main support at least gives you more of a fighting chance. That's about all I've got to say on the support line though, so now let's talk about the coaching situation. The Valiant managed to scoop up alexyOWL and alexyOWL to give this team a really strong sense of guidance and strategy on paper. Head coach alexyOWL was a big mastermind behind Team CC's dominance in Chinese contenders. This is one guy who knows what he's doing. He's been in charge of some excellent teams throughout the years, and it was only a matter of time until he got promoted. alexyOWL could make the Valiant better as a team, and maybe help a few of those young guys develop. Something else to mention is that he already has experience working with a good amount of the people on this team. He's coached Dia, Innovation, and Ezhan, and while alexyOWL's a coach now, he also did coach him back in the day. A good amount of the DPS is going to feel extra comfortable in this system right from day one. alexyOWL is a respectable coach for sure. He's extremely intelligent, and he could definitely help give you some production with this new roster. And while it's maybe to like a lesser extent, I kind of have similar hopes for alexyOWL. He too played under alexyOWL, so you kind of get the general feeling that he must deem him as a trustworthy partner. But that's not the only reason I like alexyOWL as a coach. He just has a lot of experience that can be reliable for a team seeking guidance. He's in a similar situation to Toby and Rascal. He's played this game for so many years. You're maybe a little worried to see this as his first coaching job and all and everything. That's a lot of pressure for a first-year coach, but his rich experience and knowledge might make him a risk worth taking. Maybe his combined efforts with alexyOWL is going to be enough to make this team better than they appear. But that's a huge maybe, because on paper, the Valiant don't have any hyper-competitive positions arguably filled out anywhere. DPS is the closest thing, and even that just feels okay. Most of the roster consists of a whole bunch of meh, below average, and people with major question marks. When I go down the list of their opponents, they pretty much get outmatched by everyone, everywhere. The Chengdu Hunters might be the one exception to this, depending on how badly their roster gets deconstructed if all the rumors are set to come true, but that's about it. The DPS maybe has some hope of popping off if Dia and Innovation or somebody else can play at their peak again, but that might not even be enough. Let's say that the DPS do play well. How many wins could they realistically get if they're consistently having to carry all by themselves? When you're below average on tank and maybe average at best on support, you're not going to go far. Due to their lack of general firepower, dependence on development, and risky signings, my expectations for the Valiant is another below average year. My projection for the 2022 LA Valiant is 20th through 15th place in the overall standings and 7th through 6th in the East. If they were better than bottom 2 in APAC, that would be a major W. The level of confidence in the Valiant just isn't where it needs to be. They're still very unestablished, and they definitely don't have a big budget still if you look at some of those signings. It's highly unlikely that they see a huge turnaround, and they're just not ready to take that next step yet. If it means anything, I doubt they're going to go winless again, but I mean, does that really say much? They have enough talent to win from time to time, which is cool, but that's literally setting the bar as low as humanly possible. They won 0 games last year. There's quite literally nowhere to go but up. On paper, their future still looks grim. I love the coaching, and I'm very excited to see people like Dia and Innovation play, but there is no way I could expect a lot from this team in their current state. Too many question marks, too many weaknesses, and not enough stability. They seriously might be the first team ever to go 20th 2 years in a row. It's possible. Like, very, very possible. It breaks my heart to know that Dia won't be playing for a great team yet again, but that's how it goes sometimes. I'm hoping to be wrong for the sake of Dia, but things don't look good. But hey, so long as the Valiant can actually be competitive from time to time, that would be a nice step. Most of the time last year, they weren't even worth watching. If they could at least provide some entertainment, I think that I and many of you would be satisfied. I know it's really hard for you to break habits, Valiant, but please, just this one time, don't let us down. Anyway, that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. There's your final episode of the series. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. Stay tuned for the power rankings, by the way. They're coming soon. But until then, thank you all so much for watching this video. I appreciate your support so much. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.